Could you imagine having a stroke and getting pulled over for a DWI? 2017, Cheryl Rhines was driving, suffering from a stroke, pulls herself over because she doesn't want to operate the vehicle. Boom. Cops pulls up behind her. State trooper arrests her for DUI. Can't identify that she's having a stroke. Arrests her. The issue here is that the delay in getting Miss Rhines to the hospital dealing with the stroke, as opposed to sending her directly to the emergency room, essentially caused permanent brain damage. And after about 6 or 7 years, since 2017, this case finally settled for about $10.5 or $11.5 million. Over $10 million. So, real issues here are police officers, state troopers properly trained? Can they recognize when someone is either A, under the influence, or B, suffering from some sort of emergency attack? In this situation, Miss Rhines, again, was suffering from a stroke, and the delay in getting her medical help essentially caused permanent brain damage. Let us know, chime in here, let us know what you think about this matter. Guys, what do you guys think about this?
I think more or less our state troopers and officers have training to go in the field and identify issues. However, I'm not sure if the officers have enough training to identify medical issues, and perhaps they have basic training. With regard to identifying the symptoms of a stroke, I don't know if that officer had the qualifications to do so. Clearly didn't, because this Miss Rhines resulted with significant brain damage. And
well, let's talk about the settlement real quick. Josh, $11.5 million settlement. How do you get a settlement against a police department who essentially is maybe doing their job? Where's their negligence? Where's their gross negligence? And how do you sue a municipality in order to recover this kind of settlement? Obviously, damages always play a serious role. No damages, no settlement. So what do you think about this?
Well, when you're representing an individual against a municipality, you always have to do the tort claims notice, right? So that's something here in New Jersey where if you're going to try an action against any type of municipality, you've basically got 90 days from the date of the event. I mean, there are some, caveats there, but 90 days from the date of the event to let the municipality know that this is happening, that you've got a claim, and then the municipality answers, and you go back and forth. In this instance, I mean, it's a tragedy what happened to her.
Yes.
She was already pulled over, clearly in signs of distress, and, is 10.5, 11.5 enough money for lifetime permanent brain damage? Probably not, but if you're doing litigation, right, we know you litigate for years and years and years. It costs quite a bit of money. Even if you're a plaintiff and you've got some contingency fee, you're paying experts, right? So that's not a law firm fronting those costs for the most part.
And medical bills.
So this
is
mounting.
This is an 8-year-old case.
And you just want it done, right? You want it resolved. So hopefully, for this woman, she is going to be well taken care of the rest of her life. She's got someone helping her manage those funds, but obviously the attorney did all the right things, right? Because that's quite a large settlement.
When they figure out what kind of settlement is proper, they look at the skills, the age of the victim, of the plaintiff. They look at
relevant cases to compare.
Well, relevant cases for sure, but they look at if somebody's skilled, if somebody's a doctor or an attorney, they may have more of a higher earning potential than maybe a factory worker or something like that.
Well, also just to chime in on what Josh said, the tort claim notice, right? You have about 90 days to file the notice. Mm-hmm. You essentially are putting the municipality on notice that you're going to be filing a claim, right? And then that city or that municipality then essentially has 6 months to do their investigation. So, they do their due diligence. What happened here? Let's review the body cams of the state trooper. Let's figure out exactly what was noticeable. Was there gross negligence or not?
Well, the state trooper should have deferred to immediately send her to the hospital, pending making sure she's okay. And then if they need to further evaluate or make an arrest, they could have done so at that time.
You could do a BAC there. I mean, you can do sobriety tests, and that happens all the time, right? Where if someone gets in an accident and they're immobile and you can't do the sobriety test, well, then you send them off to the hospital and they can do it there, right? They can do the test, they can do the blood work. So I'm a little confused about why that didn't happen here and didn't happen, quicker.
They say there was over a 2-hour delay, right? So what happened in that 2 hours, which again ultimately resulted in permanent brain damage, and why couldn't they get that blood alcohol content test done faster? But again, whether or not she had the ability to refuse the sobriety test, whether then you do have to go through the proper procedures.
But that also goes back to the procedures and protocol that the state troopers are being trained with, right? Yeah. Is there enough funding? If the funding's there, is the funding being used in a proper way? Like, there's so many things to look at here. Was the state negligent in their hiring procedures? Was the state negligent in their training procedures? There's so much. And listen, this is just one example But one example can lead to devastation, which obviously happened to Miss Rhines here, and hopefully it doesn't happen anymore. People in New Jersey.
Let's also be
We talk about
clear.
yeah.
Let's also be clear. Let's also be clear that this isn't the municipality paying out $11.5 million. They've got insurance carriers.
Yeah, Sure.
You know,
yeah,
this
yeah.
is so it's not like this claim is bankrupting this town. I
Yeah.
think it was Florham Park in Morris County. You know, that's what insurance is for. And so you can look at all the training practices, you can look at the hiring practices and see if those are up to snuff, and maybe you change them, you know, in light of this. And I'm sure they have. I mean, this was 2017.
You guys know who has the nicest buildings on the block?
The police department?
No, the insurance companies.
No, the insurance company.
There's a reason why.
Well, you know what I was going to bring up is like, you know, typical training for a police officer, right? You probably learn CPR. You probably learn certain basic types of medical training, but you know, to recognize a stroke, you know, are these troopers or are these police officers a little haphazard or happy to try to arrest somebody for a DUI? And I don't know if that was the case in the situation.
The issue I have is,
so how do you identify a
Yeah.
stroke, right? They said that there was significant issues where that she actually did present evidence of a stroke in this situation. So, you know, hopefully a police officer should be able to recognize
well, the
this
issue I have is
fairly
whether
quickly.
you could recognize it or not. You don't have to be a doctor to recognize it, but if you see that there's a person suffering,
Yeah.
what is the delay for 2 hours?
Yeah,
That doesn't make any
exactly.
sense.
Just get them to the hospital.
There is
Get them to
no
the hospital.
excuse for 2 hours.
No.
Maybe you take 10 minutes, you start realizing something's not right. Let's get her in an ambulance. Let's get her to where she needs to go, and then we'll deal with it.
But
That's the right move. I mean, that's just the reasonable move, in my
but,
opinion.
Yeah, but reality, everybody knows a friend or a family member.
But Josh,
who's
2
been-
hours.
No, I understand. But everybody knows somebody who's got a DUI, who refuses the sobriety test. You sit on the side of the road for 45 minutes. You touch your nose. You walk the straight line. You do a little dance, right? They put you in the cop car. They drive you to the precinct. By the time you sit there, you're locked to a bench, right? You know, and before you know it, 2 hours goes pretty quickly. Again, this situation, whether or not there was significant evidence of whether or not that, you know, she had some sort of stroke is the issue. And again, I think 2 hours is far too long, and that they should have recognized this even faster, which is ultimately why they were, you know, this ended in an $11.5 million settlement.
So, what do you guys think? Do you believe that justice was served for Miss Rhines with regard to the settlement and what led to her injuries? Like, what do you think as far as settlement? Do you think it was a good settlement?
I mean, I have some thoughts with regard to how to negotiate the settlement, either as a plaintiff's attorney and as somebody who's dealt with defense work as well, especially dealing with brain trauma. You know, TBI is no joke. And again, typically when you're settling these types of cases, medical experts, we call them in New York, we call them IMEs, right? So once you have this medical report, right, you then argue that based on her permanent damage, is she temporarily disabled or is she permanently disabled, right? So when you're an attorney, whatever side you're on, you have to really hit home that no, this woman, Miss Rhines, is permanently brain damaged. She can no longer function like a normal person in society based on this brain trauma, right? And this is why we need this $11.5 million settlement, which I'm sure it started off at 25 or 30 or $50 million, right? And it came back down. Now, just to keep on going here, as a defense attorney, I'm going to hire my own medical expert. I'm going to say, no, she's not permanently disabled. She's temporarily disabled. She's going to recover based on PT and therapy, and she can go back to doing her job. And I think in this case, she was a head of a marketing company doing sales and marketing, right? So is she able to get back to the world of where she could operate in her own job as a function and still be able to live somewhat of a normal life again? And I think that's the big argument here from the plaintiff to the defense side. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the case started in 2017, right? And we're in 2025. It's just settling.
Yeah.
I think likely for her, it's a cost and time factor. It sounds to me like 11.5 or whatever the number was, 10, 11, 13. Not enough for permanent brain injury, especially for, you know, clear negligence on the officer side. It seems, right? And I don't think the state would have agreed to it if they didn't think that they had some significant exposure. You know, so with that case and the time, you know, you just want it done. You want it over, and the cost, and stop the bleeding, and move on with your life. And now you've got a nest egg, and that's it.
Josh, if I'm the state, I'm settling this case. There's no way in heck I'm allowing a woman with terminal brain injury step on the stand and have doctors litigate this in court at trial. That
front of a jury.
11.5 million would have been 60 million
in front of a taxpayer jury
Instead
that
of
go to work and work hard for their money.
100%. So there is absolutely no way I allow this to get to a jury stand, to a jury decision or whatever. I absolutely settle in this case. So
yeah, the smart move is to settle, because again, it takes only one case to be a landmark, right? And if this state trooper did something, and then another state trooper did something, all of a sudden you're gonna have all these lawsuits pop out of somewhere, and it could really be devastating financially for the insurance companies, the state, et cetera, and even for the trust in our system, because that's the big thing too, is our state troopers protect us, right? They should be protecting us, but here there was negligence by this state trooper that caused an injury.
And what you
Gross
brought
negligence,
gross negligence, and what you brought up is a good point. When you settle a case out, it doesn't become precedent, right? It doesn't become a case that's reported and that people can rely upon for a similar result or make case law or anything like that for the future. So that's typically one of the many considerations that defense counsel has to make and their clients have to make when you're talking about whether to settle a claim, especially a claim like this that's going to be significant amount of money and could come back to bite you in many additional cases in the future.
I tell my clients when we come to a settlement, whether it's this type of form or a different form, is you can do better at court potentially. You could do worse at court. You could be on the same settlement number. It really depends on the wherewithal financially that you're willing to go with court, the emotional aspect that it takes on you, the mental aspect. And when you make that decision, you make the decision that's best for yourself. And here, I'm sure there was a lot to discuss. There was a possibility that maybe Ms. Rhines doesn't receive the over $10 million settlement, and there's a potential she could have gotten zero. There's a potential she could have maybe gotten more had it gone to trial, but we'll never know.
wait, light bulb just hit me.
Sure.
Josh,
That's
you're an estate's attorney. Permanent brain damage. How does she have the mental capacity to make the decision of whether or not to settle if she has permanent brain damage? Does she have somebody who's a healthcare proxy acting on her behalf to make this decision? And
well, it wouldn't be
she might. It would be a power of attorney.
Power of
It would
attorney.
be power of attorney. And she might, but the level for competency in New Jersey, whether it's to sign a contract, to sign a document, is actually just way lower than anyone would think.
That's scary.
You know, and it is. It's a little scary, the level for competency that, you know, sometimes you get clients coming in and they're elderly or whatever the case may be, and you're really trying to question whether, you know, they've got all their marbles there, right? And that they know what they're doing, they're making decisions. And that's why when we do things like that and we have clients where it's sort of questionable, we either decline the work or you fully document, you reach out to a family member, you try to do something like that. But here, just because she's permanently brain damaged and not able to fulfill the functions of what she used to do in her employment doesn't necessarily mean that she doesn't have the capacity to make these decisions. You know, being disabled does not equal lack of capacity to sign a contract.
now, isn't that a bit ironic?
It can be.
You know.
But
so.
it, not necessarily. I mean, it's what Josh is saying is 100% true. It's a very low threshold. But even if there were the case, you could apply for guardianship over her if you needed to, power of attorney if one was executed ahead of time. So there's ways to deal
And that's also another issue. If you didn't have a power of attorney, was there somebody in place, you know, that can make her medical decisions or make her decisions based on her incapacity or whatnot?
Years ago, most courts would lean on, if that were the case, if you had a litigant that was maybe not mentally there, let's say, maybe the court would appoint a guardian ad litem. But then there was a major case that came down, I can't remember the exact case name, but it came down about 3 years ago, and that stated that no longer can they appoint a guardian ad litem. You had to now go into the Chancery Court and apply
actually
for
get a guardian.
And get a guardian.
Yeah.
Which in other aspects of cases, like in divorce cases, things like that, it becomes very hard because now you don't have enough money to go through a whole litigation, and now we're finding money to pay doctors to do these reports.
Ultimately, Cheryl Rhines receives $11.5 million settlement. This is very case and fact specific. You know, got to understand your rights as a litigant. You got to understand both the plaintiffs and the defense sides here when it comes to negotiating and settling a case. Ultimately, hopefully, this money will take care of her, and on to the next matter. Yep, absolutely.